started. So if everyone can please stand, and we'll do the Gayatri Mantra. Om Bhurbhuvah Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Let us meditate on the glorious effulgence of that Supreme Being who's created the universe. May she enlighten our hearts and direct our understanding. Please be seated. Okay, hello everyone. So just sort of continuing on from what we were discussing last time. We were talking about what are the things that we are looking for in our lives, and one of the things that we are looking for is freedom, because we are all sort of trapped by all the rules and all the laws of nature. So everything that we do, every sort of action that we take, whether we know it or not, is towards this freedom. So it's under the impulse of freedom, for example, that the saint prays and the robber robs. The saint prays because he wants to be free from the idea that he is the body and the mind. He wants to seek freedom from that. And the robber robs because he wants freedom from the idea that he's lacking in certain things. And I guess the difference is one is a more permanent solution and one is a more temporary solution. But all of us, whether we know it or not, are acting under this impulse for freedom. The other thing that we're all sort of looking for is equilibrium. And the last time we were looking at, for example, everything in the physical world is always trying to reach this point of equilibrium. For example, if you disturb a sheet of water, all the water molecules will as quickly as possible, try and get back to that point of equilibrium. And we see that even with our physical bodies. For example, our bodies have to work very hard to make sure they're at the right temperature all the time, make sure there's the right levels of vitamins and minerals in our body. And our body has to work very hard because the universe keeps sort of throwing us off kilter. The environment changes, it becomes very hot, it becomes very cold, there may be a lack of resources, and our body has to work very hard to try and maintain that sort of level of equilibrium. So physically, everything is trying to go towards equilibrium, but mentally too, we are always looking for equilibrium. We want to be in a position where we are content and where we are happy with everything around us. But the problem is desires keep coming and knocking us off kilter, keep disturbing our equilibrium. And we always think just one more desire, and our equilibrium keeps getting disturbed. So what can we do to seek freedom? What can we do to seek equilibrium? The thing is, what Hinduism suggests is this entire beautiful, very complex system called the yoga system. And last time we were talking about the idea that yoga means to unite back to freedom. And we said that there are a number of different pathways for this practice of yoga. And we touched last time on this idea of bhakti yoga, which is the pathway to God through love and devotion. We also talked about the idea of selfless action as being a way of making spiritual progress. And these two are considered to be the easier pathways to making spiritual progress because you don't require any heavy philosophy, you don't require any rigorous strain on yourself. It comes quite naturally to us as human beings. But there is another path which is incredibly difficult, and that is the path of Raj Yoga. And I'd like to go into a little bit of depth into that today. And it's a brave person who decides to choose the path of Raj Yoga, the royal path or the majestic path for making spiritual progress. So the reason why we all love science, for example, is that it's not just confined to reading theories in a book. You can actually go to a lab and actually conduct the experiments which are suggested in our books. And we see that, if you put this chemical next to this chemical, it produces this reaction. And it's not just something you can read about, it's something you can actually go to the lab and do the experiment yourself. And you're like, this makes sense. There's no room for error, there's no confusion, no misunderstanding. It's all very straightforward. And that's why we love the endeavor of science. But when we look at the idea of religion and spirituality, they kind of get a bit of a bad rep, because when you are studying the idea of religion, all you usually think that you're supposed to do is just read about it in a book. You read about what some ancient prophet in some ancient time has said, and you're just expected to read about it and just believe in whatever you are told. And that's actually the problem. And then when you compare this person's belief system to this person's belief system, they look very different. And this is why we end up getting a lot of conflict in the name of religion. But actually what we have forgotten is that religion is not something which is floating in midair. It does have a solid foundation. And when you go to the fountainhead of every world religion, you find that it is actually based on the experience of one individual or a group of individuals. So for example, the whole of Buddhism is based on the spiritual experience of Buddha. The whole of Christianity is based on the spiritual experience of Christ. And the whole of Hinduism is based not just on one individual, but a whole host of individuals who we call rishis, people who have seen God. The word rishi comes from the Sanskrit root drish, which means to see. So these are the people who have seen God and have actually had that spiritual experience for themselves. And we all sort of seem to be living under the sort of misunderstanding that, we're just supposed to, spiritual experiences are only restricted to an ancient people of an ancient time, to old men with long beards sitting under trees. Whereas actually the idea of yoga is saying, no, you can actually become spiritual and practice spirituality here and now. It must become a practical thing and not something that you just read about. You don't just theorize about it, you have to actually do it for yourself. So that's the only way that we can actually make any spiritual progress. Because, you can't, for example, you can't call yourself a biologist if you just read about biology in a book. You have to pull out your microscope and look at the cells and say, oh, maybe now I can call myself a biologist. When you want to be an astronomer, you can't just read about astronomy. You have to pull out your telescope and look at the lens and observe the stars, and you can then maybe call yourself an astronomer. So if you want to become a spiritual aspirant, you can't just read about it in books. You have to actually do it for yourself. And when we look at the idea of science, we see that there are so many gadgets and gizmos to help us make it practical for us. This microscope here, this telescope here, all of these equipments, all of these tools that we have. So what is the tool that we need to make spiritual progress? And the tool, you may be surprised, is something that we all of us already possess. And that tool is the tool of concentration, the power of concentration. You may be surprised. It's very, very different from the scientific endeavor because we are no longer studying the external world. We are no longer studying the physical world. We are now entering the realm of metaphysics. And that means that our tools are no longer physical tools. They are tools inside, inner tools. And that's why this is considered to be a very difficult pathway. If you imagine concentration as being rays of light, suppose you have very scattered rays of light and you shine them on your environment. You only get a very hazy, a very scattered picture of your environment when those rays of light are very scattered. But suppose you're able to channel those rays of light into a spotlight and shine it on your environment. You get a much clearer picture, a much clearer understanding of your environment. And that's what we do through the power of concentration. The greater your power of concentration, the greater your understanding of the world. For example, if you look at a child, they're barely able to concentrate on anything for 5 minutes, and their understanding of the world is very hazy as a result of that. But as the child grows, as they grow through the education system, they develop the skills to concentrate and channel those, or make a spotlight with their power of concentration. You'll find that the child is then able to concentrate for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour. And the greater the concentration, the greater the understanding of the world. And actually, if you think about it, all of these gadgets and gizmos of science would be pretty worthless if we didn't also have the power of concentration. The biologist doesn't just look through the lens of his microscope. He throws his powers of concentration through the lens of his microscope and understands the secrets of how cells work. The astronomer doesn't just look through the lens of his telescope, he throws his powers of concentration through the lens of his telescope, and the stars will reveal their secrets to him. So actually the universe is ready to reveal its secrets to us if only we know how to knock. And the way that we knock is by developing this power of concentration. So what the yoga system, what Raja Yoga is proposing is that, we are so used to throwing our concentration outside on a book, on a piece of equipment. What Raja Yoga is saying is, rather than focusing that concentration outside, spotlighting it outside, focus it inside. Mind studies mind. And that's a very, very difficult process to do. Not only because we don't have any physical tools to help us to do it, there's nothing to hold on to, nothing to focus your mind on physically, but also because we haven't practiced it. Through our education system, we really learn how to concentrate. We hone our skills. In a way, it's a bit like, flexing a muscle. The more you flex that muscle, the better you get at it. And that's why, when you sort of finish school and university, you're pretty good at developing concentration. You can focus your mind on a book or something like that for an hour or more. And we're pretty good at it because we've been practicing it for our entire education, through our entire education. But we haven't practiced this idea of focusing inwards. And it's a very, very difficult thing. We need to sort of, in a way, practice it for ourselves. It's, in a way, an exercise which is like going to the gym for your mind, essentially. And just to sort of, if you would like to, there's absolutely no pressure to do this, some voluntary homework, if you like. Whenever you have any spare time, suppose you've got 5 minutes to spare, think about something that you want to meditate on. It could be a mantra, it could be the sound Om, it could be an image of God that you like, for example. To close off all distractions around you, put your phone on silent, and just set an alarm for 5 minutes. And sit down, close your eyes, and try and focus on that sound or that image that you have. And in a way, observe a little bit as to what your mind is doing. Watch what your mind does as if it's like a film that you're watching. Just observe what your mind is doing. And what you will find is that maybe 30 seconds or a minute into this exercise, your mind, without you even realizing it, your mind is very clever, will start sort of digressing into, I must hand in my assignment tomorrow, and what am I going to have for lunch today, and I must call my mum later. And before you even realize it, your alarm will have gone off. And then when you sit down and analyze, how much of those 5 minutes did I actually focus on what I was supposed to focus on? You'd be lucky if it was 30 seconds or even a minute. You can concentrate on your physics book for an hour, no problem, because we've been practicing that skill. But we have just not been practicing this skill of focusing inwards. And it's a much more difficult task because, as we said, there is nothing physical to focus our minds on. But the way that we can sort of resolve the problem is first by acknowledging that there is a problem in the first place. We all acknowledge that we are mentally inside. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. We're a bit of a mess inside. It has happened to me multiple times when I sit down and meditate. The amount of times that my mind just goes off all over the place and you're just not able to focus. So in a way, if you really want to find a solution to this, say, no matter how busy I am, I will spare 5 minutes of my day and I will close off all distractions and sit down and focus on this. And you will find that your mind will keep doing this. It will keep pushing you away from trying to focus on this. In a way, your mind is like a little child that is being forced to sit still for 5 minutes. You can imagine how difficult it is to get that child to sit still for 5 minutes without any distraction. It's a very, very difficult process. But the more that you practice, just spend 5 minutes every day, spend 2 minutes every day if that's too much for you, spend 2 minutes every day just to sit down and focus and see if you can spend that entire 2 minutes focused purely on that image or on that mantra or on that sound that you want to focus on. So yes, internally there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And sometimes you get people who may think, you know what, this is all a bit sort of airy-fairy. there's no real sort of proof in the pudding. We all know that our minds go here and there. I'd much rather focus my energy and my attention on the outside. That is totally fine as well. And when you look at these great sort of scientists of the world, that is exactly what they've done. They have honed their skill of concentration and generated such tremendous insight, such tremendous knowledge through their skills of understanding the external world. And really, if you think about it, if you really want to get to the truth, you will do whatever it takes. When you sit down to meditate, actually, there is no external pressure for you to do this whatsoever. There's no exam to study for, there's no top grade to get. There is nothing pushing you to do this. The only thing that would push you to do it is your own self-perseverance. If you want to know, really, is there anything to this? Try and do it for yourself. Try and find out for yourself. Your own perseverance is the only thing that will drive you forward. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. But if you want to really come to the nitty-gritty of it, see if there is any reality to this system of yoga, which has been taught for thousands of years. See if it's real or not. You have to have that perseverance for yourself. So yes, so we were saying that, when you look at sort of scientists, they don't want to focus inside at all. They just want to focus outside. But actually, when you really come to the limits of your concentration, when you come to the limit of your knowledge, you find that, for example, if you are a physicist, you'll find yourself entering the realm of metaphysics. And we see that very clearly with this idea of quantum mechanics. Physicists have been pushing the limitations of their knowledge, and they find that they're no longer dealing with physical building blocks of the world. They're dealing with something metaphysical, something non-material. And you find in quantum mechanics, for example, that particles behave differently in the presence of a conscious observer. And then the physicist will scratch his head and say, who is this conscious observer? He might turn to the biologist and say, you deal with life, you deal with biology. Tell us, who is this conscious observer? And the biologists will also scratch their head. They'll say, what is consciousness? What part of the brain produces consciousness? There is no particular part of the brain that produces consciousness. Even a single-celled organism is conscious, but there is no part of their physiology which produces consciousness. So where is this consciousness? We all seem to know what it is, but it seems to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And this is again entering the realm of metaphysics, because the reality of this whole situation is, if we want to get a true understanding of the entirety of the universe, we can't just sort of forget that there is this whole metaphysical dimension to this universe. We look at the physical world and we try and brush it under the carpet that there is anything more than the physical. But even science is now starting to hit roadblocks because it doesn't want to step into the realm of the metaphysical. You can see science is in a way stagnating. Quantum mechanics is just causing a lot of issues for a lot of scientists. This idea of consciousness is causing a lot of issues for a lot of scientists because there is no physical part of the brain which produces it. And we all seem to intuitively know what it is. But when we try and put it into words, it's a very, very difficult task. So yes, what we find is that eventually all of us, the person who is choosing to sit down and meditate and focus their energy of concentration inwards, and the scientist who is out there studying the world, ultimately, you may be surprised, actually they are heading on the same trajectory, because ultimately we have to acknowledge the presence of the metaphysical. If we want to get a true understanding of the entirety of the universe, we can't just brush the metaphysical under the carpet, and we have to explore it and take that leap away from this stodgy materialism to say, actually, there is something deeper here, which is the foundation to our entire universe. So yeah, that was just a broad introduction to the idea of Raj Yoga. And maybe next time what I'll do is I'll go into a bit more of the sort of nitty-gritties of it. It's a very, very difficult process, and I'm not suggesting to any of us that we should try it. If you want to, you're obviously welcome to. But there is a whole set of disciplines that you have to master in order to be able to be considered fit to sit down and even meditate. And what the yoga system does, it actually says we must be able to control nature external, but we also have to be able to control nature internal. And this is why, when you think of the word yoga, you think of all the sort of physical exercises that people do. And people think that's all there is to yoga. It's all about just getting a more physically fit and healthy body to be able to go out there in the world and enjoy life more. And in a way, there's nothing wrong with that. But you've forgotten this huge, vast section of the yoga system, which is actually saying that you have to be able to focus internally, which is a much, much more difficult process. So yoga addresses the external, but also the internal. If you think about it, you will not be able to sit down and meditate if you're coughing and wheezing and you're not feeling well. Your mind will just be completely agitated. And if you think about it, mind and body are so deeply interconnected with each other. Suppose, you're feeling angry, suppose you're feeling stressed. It produces a physiological reaction in your body. Certain chemicals are released and it has an impact on you physically. And suppose physically you are also not feeling well, you're feeling sick and you're feeling ill. It will also have an impact on your mind as well. So mind and body are deeply interconnected with each other. And the yoga system tries to address it from both ends. The external, the physical body, but also the mind internally as well. So that's just a broad sort of introduction to the idea of Raj Yoga. It's a very sort of scientific process, and if you really persevere and you really want to know if there is anything to do it, you will want to give it a try. You'll want to see. And the yoga system is very, very clear cut. It's a no frills approach to spirituality, because it will say, look, the whole aim of yoga is to calm the modifications of the mind. The first verse of the Yoga Sutra is Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. The whole purpose of yoga is to calm the mind down. And it has a whole set of very, very concentrated spirituality, rigorous methodology which you can follow if you dare to. And it could take not just one lifetime, it could take many lifetimes to get there. But as we have said before, in reincarnation, you carry forward all the efforts of your previous life. So you pick up from where you've left off, and you continue your spiritual journey in that way. So that's an introduction. Anything that doesn't make sense? Anything you'd like to discuss about the yoga system? Anything at all? But I would suggest, if you would like to sort of do this little experiment of meditation, it's worth it, just to, in a way, to see what a mess we are inside, and see that actually we've got a lot of work to do inside. We're very good at focusing outside, but we need to learn how to focus more inside as well. And you'll find actually, the more you practice it, if you just do it once or twice, you might think, oh, it's not really made any difference. But it's like going to the gym. If you just go once or twice, it's not really going to have much of an impact. You have to persevere. You have to make it a rigorous, regimented, daily process in order to see any sort of benefits. And what you may find is that, for example, if you're suddenly faced with a very stressful situation, a very stressful scenario, if you have been practicing meditation, you will find that you will somehow be able to cope with it better than if you hadn't been. Before the whole process of meditating, you'll find that you'll actually be able to cope with it better when you have had this practice of controlling your mind internally. So lots of food for thought, and thank you so much for listening.
Free e-learning course in Hinduism. To register, please visit www.hindu-academy.com.
Talks on Hinduism. Sponsored by People Care. Encouraging caring for the elderly in their own homes. For more information, please visit peoplecare.com.